Welcome to another episode of Behind the Strategy, a place for conversations, a place to find out and reveal all. What is behind your strategy? And in this episode, I'm talking with Graham Coath, and we're having another wonderful conversation about the importance of topics that you choose for your podcast conversations. What should we be talking about?
Recording has started. I love that. I love how it tells you these days that the recording has started.
Yeah.
Because it feels like there's an expectancy there, right from the word go.
Yes, it's all right now. Sit still, children. Listen, hands on laps.
Yeah.
Behave.
Or now I have to put my brain and my mouth in a particular order because something has started and I'm now being captured. That's an interesting concept in itself, isn't it?
It is actually, because each of us has a different way of doing that, and also the way that we do that will other people will it will trigger other people in certain ways too. Like, I like the way that some people do it. You did it. It was nice. It was gentle. I was like, yes, let's settle into this. Other people, it's like, right, 3, 2, 1, go. And you're like, deer in headlights. So do you then follow that person? Do you then continue to work with that person? It's like people, their whole manner, their whole approach of expectations of setting us up to step into doing something, getting our head into order. Very important, isn't it? Very important.
Yeah, and it brings out some of the things that we're going to talk about in this conversation today around difference and around polarization and around type of people that we want to work with, or the type of people that we gravitate towards as well. I'm going to start by asking you, when we're putting this podcast together, who is it that you're looking for as guests? Who is it that you are wanting to speak to?
Yeah, who am I looking to speak to? People who have an interesting take, firstly, on themselves. So people who recognise within themselves that they are multifaceted, they are complex. We are all complex beings. and naturally assume the rest of us are. So that's a really good starting point. Because people like that... Sorry, yeah.
No, I was going to say, that's an interesting point in itself, that you say that they naturally assume that everybody else is, because I actually think, and I think you do as well, or not just think, but probably know, that actually a lot of people online don't think or don't make those assumptions, or actually make assumptions but don't actually think about the fact that other people are different from them.
Yes, and each day and every day I am pleased to say people say, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't think of it in that way. That validates my opinion for a start. And it also brings me joy, because when they say that, it means that they're willing to have a conversation and find out more. Now, it's interesting you've said that a lot of people don't make those assumptions, which is true. But also I'm wondering how many of those people who appear to, I want to say, go along with the crowd or follow what they're told, or genuinely believe it's the way to do things, or genuinely believe it's the way to do things. How many of them are not questioning themselves because they're just blindly following? And has that worked for them previously? Does that always work? And is it something people will question about themselves when something doesn't work? And that brings me to the core values again. How much trust and faith do we have in making our own decisions about everything, including who we are? And that's fascinating to me. Those are the people who I want to speak to, because those people who are perhaps in that situation already, they're recognizing those conversations are really, really important, because you, when I was younger, my grandmother and I were walking along. Now, my grandmother, I called her my nana. She worked for secretaries in Parliament, and she always used to like to tell everyone I worked for somebody something, and took me around the Houses of Parliament when I was aged 11, and to experience the gravitas of the whole situation. But she was very quick-witted, very astute, very, very intelligent. She was actually given a place to go to Oxford when she was younger, but she couldn't go because her father was a major in the army, and it wasn't really the thing for women to do. So she felt probably the frustrations that I felt over the years. The thing is this. She accepted me for being me. She didn't mind when I blurted something out. So we could watch something on the television, and I would say, "Oh, but Nana, why on earth would they do that? Why doesn't somebody tell them that that's not how to do it?" And she just turned to me and said, "Well, you can't wake sleepers until they're ready to wake up." Now, obviously, that then had to involve a lot of other conversations because aged 11, it took a bit of chewing over. But isn't that true? Isn't it? You can tell people and guide people, but you can't wake them up and say, you want to give people a shake sometimes, don't you? Say, look, seriously, it's not because I don't like you or disagree with you, but seriously, can you not even consider the possibility that your view of the world and your perspective isn't the only one?
Yeah, that leads me to think about lurkers. Because lurkers are actually probably 80% of what makes up a platform like LinkedIn. Not so much on other platforms maybe, but certainly on LinkedIn, it's a huge part of the population are people who are, if you like, just voyeurs of other people's content, will like it, gravitate towards what they like, but don't want to say anything or don't want to put their viewpoint out.
Yes, I think Facebook is as well. Facebook and LinkedIn both. I have deliberately, and I know you've done this as well, Graham, I have deliberately just thrown one of those, not, oh, hey, what's your typical ice cream flavour? But yes, something like that. You mentioned in a post the other day. Just not because I'm trying to do it for the engagement, but because there's better ways of doing things. But it does give you a little insight as far as analytics are concerned, and we all have to be quite on top of our businesses, don't we? We need to recognise that we need these analytics for us to move forward. Who is actually suddenly commenting and liking? What type of posts are they resonating with? Why is it only that type of post? And it could be somebody that you've never worked with, never would work with, maybe not in any of the groups. And it's interesting. You think, I wonder why. And 2 or 3 years go by and nothing. That's all it ever does. And I think there are two categories of lurkers. One category is the people who just generally are finding people interesting and just help boost their day. And if you're funny, you might have good tips or something general to just help. And then there are the others who are learning and taking on board. Maybe they might work with them, maybe they won't, but they're learning and sharing and appreciating conversations.
I want to expand on that because somebody put a post on LinkedIn this morning about being boring, which is a really interesting concept. I'm not sure that the person who posted it actually paid enough attention or actually thought enough about what they were actually saying. But why I think it is an interesting subject is because ultimately, and they encourage people to list things about themselves which are boring, but ultimately there are no things that are boring about anybody. It's ultimately down to the person that is seeing that information, reading that information, interacting with that information as to whether or not they perceive that to be boring or not. Yeah. What I find boring is not somebody else's boring. What I find interesting is not necessarily interesting to somebody else. And so I found it a very interesting post in a way anyway, because it just doesn't really kind of make sense. But also, in going back to what you were saying about those polls about ice cream flavour or whatever, one of the reasons you will get amazing traction on anything like that is because it takes a question that is at a basic level to everybody. It's something that everybody has an opinion on, right? It's literally like saying, I mean, almost the ultimate poll question is you choose black or white, right?
Yeah.
That's yes or no.
Yeah.
That's, you know, and you wouldn't need to necessarily even give context for that. Anything that's literally polaric in its purest form, and it's like, you make a decision now, one or this or that, just do it, you know, and it's something you don't have to think about. You're gonna respond, because it's just kind of like an innate human response to very clear data in front of you. When you actually have to decipher, the more you have to decipher, the more you have to attach yourself to an opinion or a viewpoint, or have something resonate with you before you can actually respond to it, the more distant you are from that, and therefore the more effort it takes in order to make that response. Yeah?
Yes. And that brings two things to mind. One is, there is actually a Facebook group called the Dull Men Club, right? And it's hysterical. I'm not a member, I've joined, but I've clicked on it and liked it because it's open. And it brings me joy when it scrolls past on my feed, because it's just full of complete sarcastic humour. And it just proves, and everybody that posts, they post things such as, yes, well, and I'm doing that specifically because I sort of want, I'm imagining their voice, which probably sounds nothing like this at all. I'm like, yes, well, I noticed that the architecture on this building was slightly different, and I think it's because, and then I'll go into it, and they will make some really funny thing about it, because, you know, the assumption is that perhaps guys are talking about architecture could be a bit boring. And at the bottom would be like a concerned man who's also interested in Lego and trains, you know, and I find that really funny, and it sort of throws into face the assumptions that we make. And now I've forgotten the second thing.
But that doesn't matter. What I was going to say, though,
yeah.
Go on.
No, what would just refresh me, because I'll cut this bit out. Just refresh me again. You were saying about the polarization of. Could you just?
Yeah. So I was talking about on polls that the more sort of it refers to something that everybody has an opinion on. Yeah.
And the second thing is, drum roll please, fear of commitment, right? Because by committing ourselves to an opinion or a decision, what does that tell other people about? And that is that, even if you roll that back further, fear of perception, fear of being misunderstood. I'm saying that from my perspective. Other people have fear of commitments for other different reasons, but specifically talking about making statements or opinions or commenting online, we are mindfully aware some people don't care. They really don't give, two hoots. But others will take that as a given. And what I wanted to say about that is that, going back to the previous episode where we talked about how I like to live through honesty, honestly, my ice cream flavour is not the same now as it was 5 years ago. I'm sorry to break that to you. Now, if I told you that it used to be rum and raisin, and at the moment I'm going for a mint chocolate chip phase, does that mean by me saying mint chocolate chip that does it mean I've grown? Does it mean I've evolved? Does it mean I'm allowed to change my mind? Or if somebody says, well, hang on a minute, I thought you liked rum and raisin. Well, what's going on there then? Do you know what I mean? You're not being honest. That's not what you said last year. That's not what you said before. challenge. People don't accept that level of change, do they?
No. And I think what's quite interesting, and one of the things that I've done with my polls, is challenge that whole area as well, is that I'll let you into a secret now, which is that I have sometimes done the same poll at a different period, but what I've done is I've framed it completely differently in terms of the actual post, and I've actually framed it differently in terms of the interaction and who, you know, I've managed to get people to vote on a particular answer first to see where it takes the voting.
Yes.
Right? Because because we're assuming that we have a viewpoint, we put that viewpoint down, and if we're faced with a simple task like choosing that on a poll, we'll always choose the same thing. The reality is we won't, because if we have it framed in a different social way for us, where there's maybe an expectation, and this is why I was talking the other day on a post about sci-fi films and about Jedi mind tricks, and I said, actually, this poll has got nothing to do with sci-fi films. The Jedi mind trick is actually how we frame our information, how we put that out there into the world will impact the way that people interact with it. And it's a naivety for people to think that actually my mind is completely my own, because social forces do come into play.
They do. And so do linguistics. And being that I did study linguistics for 2 years, went back to uni to study linguistics for 2 years. Linguistics, the language that we use, will, just one small word will reframe our viewpoint, our perspective, the way that we answer, right? Now, in marketing, that's a given. In the reading of the news, when they put the news out, are they talking about freedom fighters? This is the traditional one. Are they talking about freedom fighters or terrorists? You know, you decide. It depends. The slant that the information we are given and fed through the news, it trickles through our subconscious into our conscious mind from the language that is used, and it helps to form. It what's the word? It influences our thought processes and our decision making and our bias. Okay, it has to work like that. Politicians do it all the time. It's a given. So we're doing that every day on a micro level in our posts, and some on a very a higher level, like you said. You do it deliberately. You switch things around to determine that, so we can reframe, we can test. Now, people will, when you're making a decision, a quick one like a poll or an answer for those sorts of things, they jump to what comes first in their mind. And then we'll quite happily just, this is it, right, it's now, no big drama, I'll just respond, this is how I'm feeling at the moment. You know, we're not stalkers, we're not going back challenging people. You didn't say that last year, you didn't say that my last poll. That's not happening. But what is interesting is to be able to compare the analytics between how many people are now gravitating towards this option as opposed to this option. And you can see that in comments as well. So I saw a post today as well, and it was about stepping out of your comfort zone. So this is what happened. They made I like the poster very much so, advocate for ADHD, especially for women, and would love to get them on the poll, Mr. Partridge, if you're listening. The podcast, I'd love to get them on the podcast if you're listening, Mr. Partridge. But the perspective was, when you read it down, the perspective was that stepping out of your comfort zone, they had seen a comment which said, a post which said, if you don't step out of your comfort zone, you're not going to grow, you're not going to be successful. Comfort zones are for weak people, right? Well, pretty polarizing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. went on to say, now the rest of the post, it wasn't done specifically to polarize to get that opinion, because when you read the rest of the post, you could see it was actually coming from his own opinion, where he was saying, taking that specific example as a given, not transferring it into all the other possibilities out there, and just saying, hang on a minute, if a comfort zone is your happy place, who are we to tell people not to step out of the happy place if that's what they want to be? If they're happy with things, what does the comfort zone mean? And so I read it as being interesting because I saw the challenge behind that most of the comments were like, well, yes, actually, you should step out your comfort zone. It was either for or against comfort zones and risk. And there were only a few of us that actually went behind that and saw, no, hang on a minute, let's just challenge this. What is a comfort zone? What does the comfort zone actually mean? Because there's a lot of toxic narrative around what it means, people's interpretations, people's assumptions, and it influences how people will respond and feel about themselves if they take on board some of that toxic narrative and think, oh, I really should push myself. But actually, who says that? Why? Where's that coming from? It's going back down again to the core values where we take on other people's beliefs and it rocks our own belief in ourselves.
And this really kind of brings us back to the kind of people that you want to talk to on this podcast. And I would dare to say, let's go back to that whole thing about boring. People might think that the perfect person to have on a podcast is someone that's not boring, right? Which is an assumption in the first place.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually, one of the things that's actually of interest to you, because you're a values-based driven person and the values are the important thing, is that you want to talk to people that wear their values on their sleeve, and actually their story, however it might be, or however the perception of them as a person online might be initially that person's boring, when you start to hear somebody's values in their story, you realise they're not boring. You realise that actually that's the last thing that they are. Right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, we could all draw up a list, couldn't we, of, I suppose, influencer types that you might want to get onto a podcast and go, do you know what? I want to hear this, this and this. But actually, for a lot of those people, we've heard their story. For a lot of their people, we know the raison d'etre, we know the rhetoric. We've heard all of this before. The interesting thing is all of those lurkers, all of those, in inverted quotes, boring people that we haven't heard the story of.
Yeah.
But actually, if we get to know it, we'll suddenly go, look at them. And also with that, what we'll realise as well is that perhaps we're not as boring as we think we are.
Yes.
Actually, our story is of interest as well. Surely that's one of the main aims of doing this piece of work, is to actually show other people that they can do this.
Yeah, it is. And people fascinate me because I don't always get some social cues. Now, on one hand, having my lovely ADHD brain, I can read the room and I know exactly what's going down. I can tell by a twitch and a wink what you're thinking. And then other days, when I'm more thinking about myself, I might not read the room. I might miss certain signals. Now, this is not just down to ADHD. This is people in general, as well. Everybody misunderstands the situation. But I guess because I have spent majority of my life being misunderstood, my go to try and get myself out of situations was to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper to find out why, the root of what was happening. And I would sometimes get into a conversation where someone would accuse me of saying something in a certain tone. Now, I, for many years, took that as my fault because I put across the right tone. Imagine how many wasted years that is for me to try and get it right for everyone else in the world. We have just spoken about how everyone's different. I set myself, unwittingly, an impossible task. It's just never going to happen, right? However, it's expected by others as well that it should happen. And so I would dig deeper and deeper and deeper into the conversation, follow it through, be quite tenacious about it to then make sure that I actually learned by default how to put things across in different ways, different perspectives. And what I learned was that there's this type of people where you have to explain things in this way, and the other people you explain things in another way. And actually, any educator is going to tell you that everybody learns differently, kinesthetically, audio, visual, all that sort of thing. Anyway, so I was taking that step further as a mechanism for survival, so to speak, for myself, so that it's only when I found out many years later, that actually it's just how my brain sees things. And so the type of people that I look for and would really like to interview are people who, yes, they may share their story, but they don't always repeat it. They will go into different aspects of it, or you find out something new. Amazing post the other day, and I've watched this guy, Mark Hogan, definitely getting you on the podcast, sir. Very inspirational man, and I've seen his development as he's shared it on LinkedIn, and he has talked about how he's been learning things. He was a pioneer for doing a video every day years ago, which I absolutely look forward to every evening, because I find him interesting, because he can take the mundane or take the ordinary or take the boring, and when you hear him speak, it isn't. And I found that incredibly inspirational many years ago, and it really inspired me to be like that, have that approach myself online. Now, I had to go through a learning curve as well. I was like, what are people going to think? What happens when I do this? The same as everybody else does. But he did a fantastic post the other day about imposter syndrome, and he is somebody who, in his posts, invites conversation, like yourself, inviting conversation, and not just saying, oh yeah, I hear what you're saying in a comment, but actually coming back with it invites you to make a serious comment, a valid conversational comment, and then 2 or 3 more comments afterwards about having a good conversation about that. And he put forward something, and I said I found that really quite interesting, because actually I see it completely the other way around. And of course he found that fascinating, and we had what some might call a bit of a boring conversation, but actually it was fascinating because we both learned from that purely from a post on LinkedIn. And isn't that powerful? That is so powerful.
That to me is where it is the most powerful, is where, that was the nature of my post today, actually, which is, are you following content that challenges you? Because I don't think that a lot of people are necessarily.
No.
Personally, that's what I want to follow. Is I don't want to be a hearsayer to a rhetoric that is the same all of the time, and I just say yes to it. I want to read people's content that makes me stop and think and go, actually, am I right or am I wrong?
Yes, I do. And that makes me I saw there's a fantastic woman, Jenny Kovacs. I interviewed her in a previous podcast episode. She is somebody who has conversations. She is incredible, this woman. And we met originally in Clubhouse. Now, this is what you've said. We just talked about not wanting to be boring. We don't want to be the mundane. We want to be, somebody who's interesting. We also want others to see us like that. Now, we don't always know the truth. Are they lurking? Are they telling us? Are we buying into it? It all raises their whole, ego thing, doesn't it? She did a live. Been doing a year of little lives. I caught one of them and I thought, that's a brilliant topic. So I just gave it a little heart. Couldn't actually jump on and listen to all of it. I listened to most of it. I couldn't comment. It was a bit late. So I gave it a heart because I thought, oh, this is fascinating. And I listened to most of it up until the very end bit. That was it. Anyway, I then, not long after, the next day, she had messaged me and said, thanks ever so much for showing some love. And I said, well, no, it was absolutely fantastic. It was a brilliant topic. I found it really interesting. And here's what she put. I really miss your kickassery in Clubhouse. And I just thought, oh, wow. I was gobsmacked. I just thought, crikey, to have had that impression and to be memorable in that way, that meant so much to me. And it also proved that I was right. She is that person. She is the type of person who I want to, who values people, who remembers that, who likes conversations, and conversations become memorable within themselves because we look to people, we're inspired, and we can then share that to others. I found that meant a lot to me, and I just messaged back and said, oh my gosh, to be associated with the word kickassery, you've just made the whole year for me. Maybe that should be my word of the year for going forward or forever.
I love that. Well, I think what this does is this throws out a warning, really, to anyone out there who Kate sees as interesting, when you might think that you're not all that interesting. Just a little warning, Kate may be coming for you. To have your conversation and share a little bit of actually your very, very interesting life. And
100%.
for anyone out there who thinks that they're interesting, but actually is immensely dull, because actually you never say anything other than the one thing that you just say because you think you need to say it, here's another warning. Kate will not be coming for you, because that is just not the kind of person we need on. The kind of person that's confident in their own marketing at the moment, but actually has got nothing to say and isn't interested in listening to the opinion of others.
Yeah.
That is who quite often become podcast guests because they have the following, because they have the numbers, because they have the panaz. That's not who we want on the podcast, because you
don't.
You've got your 15 minutes in the algorithm, and that's lovely. But it's about the wonderful people out there who actually are quietly or in amazing ways changing the world and making a massive difference, but actually don't need to have the razzmatazz around them to do it. They're just getting on with it, and they've got the stories to tell us all because they've lived,
Yeah.
and actually getting there has probably taken them through all sorts of jungles, which and there's lots of people out there like that. There's lots of people out there.
There are some people who are out there who want to make change, not for the sake of it or because of they believe it should be done, but because they know it's not a cause, a champion. It's something that they really, truly believe, that there's change that needs to happen in whatever it is that they do believe in. And because that's the only way we can make a difference, because how can we evolve and grow if we're not prepared to make changes? And if we are prepared to make changes, are those changes in line with our core values, or are we paying lip service?
Yeah. Well, there's the challenge, folks. If Kate contacts you to appear on the podcast, now you know why.
Because people say, she only takes boring people. We set a precedent here.
I think you should get some T-shirts made that say "definitely not boring." But there you go. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Thanks,
been good.
Graham.
It's been good to talk again.
Yeah.
Folks, look out for the podcast. It's coming soon, and it will be great.
Thanks, Graham. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Behind the Strategy. I hope you enjoy listening to the next one. Please subscribe so you get notified of when that's published. And if you'd like to find out more, please pop over to thestrategysuccesslab.com. And please do share this with anyone who you think might need this today.